welcome to today's episode of EdTech Made Easy. I'm your host, Steve Ford. I am joined today by a very special guest. You may know him as the EduTech Wizard on TikTok, Instagram, X, Blue Sky. We'll have all those links in the description. He is formerly the digital learning coach or a digital learning coach in the Frisco Independent School District. He is MagicSchool's 2024 AI Educator of the Year. He is currently the community and social media manager at MagicSchool.ai. He is the one, the only Andrew Davies. Andrew, welcome. I appreciate you joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
Is there anything else you want to add about your experiences or introduce yourself further?
Man, yeah, I could just tell a little bit about my background real quick if you want. That was a great introduction, though. Thank you. I didn't know you were going to bring in all the social media stuff in there, but no, I've been in education, public education, for about 15 years. I started as a 4th and 5th grade teacher, and then made the transition into being a digital learning coach for the last few years, basically coaching teachers on using technology. And the last couple of years, that became pretty heavily focused on AI, just more because I was, a tech nerd. And once the ChatGPT came out and all those things, I had to jump on it and figure out ways to show teachers and find ways to use it. And so I started the social media thing kind of out of that. It was more just for the teachers in my 2 campuses. I wanted to share quick little mini PDs with them. Like, here's a 1-minute video on how to use this and 1-minute video on how to do this, because they didn't have time to read my newsletters. So kind of that just kind of kicked things off, and the rest is history. The opportunity with Magic School came up this summer, and it was one that I just had to take, and it's been a wild ride ever since. So
how, out of all the tools you used or helped teachers to use, how did AI kind of become your thing? What excited you the most about that?
So it all started with ChatGPT to begin with, right? So it was a couple of years ago when it first kind of came on the scene. And I remember I was sitting there was a session at TCEA, which is a big conference here in Texas. And there was at the entire conference, there was one session on AI, which is wild because the next year it was like every session was AI. And I went to that one session because I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. Almost empty room. This guy was like, just kind of diving into like, what is ChatGPT? What is this new thing? Like that, it just kind of started coming out. And I remember sitting there and just asking it to create like word problems for me, like real basic, like, holy cow, like this just made me, 20 problems that were related to Minecraft, like in seconds. I think that was the very first thing that just blew, like immediately I knew this is going to be insanely beneficial to teachers. Once obviously there's things that had to have to improve and all that, but that sitting in that session is where it really kicked off for me, because I don't think I paid attention to a single thing the guy said. The second I got into ChatGPT for the first time, I was like, holy cow. And I just kept going and going, asking it all kinds of things, seeing what it could do. So yeah, that's where it started for me. And that's where I immediately knew it was going to be huge. And then the next big aha for me was, so I ran across Magic School on my own. Like I was in different forums, and at that point, people were just sharing out all these different tools that were coming out like as fast as, lightning. Magic School was one that popped up. It was the first one that I found that had tools pre-prompted for teachers. So I think the rubric generator was the first thing that I played with. And then I remember making a video for social media on that one. And that one just got me crazy excited because, I'd never seen something create like in a chart, a rubric that's ready to go. And that just blew my mind. And, but anyways, that's kind of where it kicked off for me. And then everything else, I've dabbled in every single product that's out there, education based at least, and played with them all extensively. And so, yeah, I'm obsessed with it all.
Well, it's funny, your experience sitting in that session and playing around with ChatGPT. It's kind of similar to as I started diving more into AI. It was Magic School, and my wife was on a district. We teach in the same district. She was on a district tech committee that I'm now a part of, and she came home and was like, you should try this out. You'd love this. And I started just playing around and I generated something and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Let me see if I can add this. And I, now do this, now do that, now bold the words and create a glossary. And she took a picture of me. I was like, this is incredible. Hands on my head, like cartoonish. Yeah. And it was a similar thing where I was like, this is, kind of exciting and energizing. And it very similar, it sounds like, to kind of what your first experience was in thinking about what it could do for you. So as you did that and working with training and leading teachers, what do you think the benefits for teachers are in using AI in their planning and prep?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many. The kind of the obvious one that first comes to mind, right, is the time saving. And I think that's what a lot of like AI companies will push, is like, oh, we can save you all this time. And I think that's great. And I think it's important that teachers get some time back, just, because burnout's a real thing, and teachers need time for themselves and, for their mental health and all those things. But I personally think the power in it, in even just getting that time back, is then what can you do with that time for your students, right? Like if you have time back for yourself that's giving you energy, well, then now I can build that project that I wanted to do with my class that I felt too tired to do, right? Or I can actually build those differentiated groups on a nightly basis if I have to, because I've got AI that can help me do it. That's the powerful part with the time saving piece. I also think it's an incredible thought partner. AI can come up with some crazy ideas that you would never imagine. Like you just ask, like we have Raina, our chat bot, right? Like our version of ChatGPT. It's kind of like a instructional coach, and you just ask it and say, hey, like what I'm doing this lesson on metamorphosis. How can I integrate technology into this lesson? How can I hit my struggling learners in this lesson? How can I make this lesson engaging for my students who've already mastered this? They already know all about it, right? And it can help you come up with all those ideas rather than you having to think about it every time yourself. So that not only saves time, but it's also helping you become a better teacher, right? Better educator, and help you meet the needs of all the kids in your class. So I think those two things especially are huge for teachers. And I think it's just like it is like a planning partner, it's a thought partner as well, right? So I kind of already touched on this, but it's just helping you grow in your teaching practices, because, especially if you use tools like ours that are designed for education, it's trying to give you the best possible output for an educator. And so it's going to give you ideas on how you can, better approach a lesson or better approach a small group that's struggling. And so I think those are the best benefits.
It's funny when you talked about creating differentiated groups. I used Raina today to make a new seating chart where I just put a little mark next to certain students' names and said, separate these students, and this student needs to sit in the front, and tinkered around with it a little bit, because I was like, oh wait, I forgot to say to keep those two apart and things like that. And saves, the amount of time I've spent making seating charts over the years. It's like, I always tell my students, it's when are we gonna have a new seating chart? And I'm like, well, it's kind of like putting together a puzzle that has like an extra piece in it sometimes, right? You notice something every time. And it was just being able to just generate several different options quickly was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So what obstacles do you think teachers have when they're trying to use AI?
Well, I think one obstacle right now is, districts adopting AI. I think a lot of districts are trying to come up with policies to make sure that it's safe, most obviously for students first, and then making sure that it's reliable for teachers to use. And so I think that's a big part of it is, are you even allowed to use it? So many teachers I talk to, their district they have everything blocked. And some of those teachers are still using it at home and things like that, but they can't use it on campus during planning time. So that's one blocker. Two is a fear of it, because I know some teachers just don't understand it yet, which is fine. I mean, everybody's still learning, and so there's a fear of like, is this okay to use? There's a fear of, is the information correct? Is it accurate enough? I think all those things play into it. And then there's the the fear side. So not so much like it's scary, but the fear of having to learn something new. And a lot of times in the ed tech space, I was a tech coach before, and I was always asked to present new technology and new things to the teachers. And a lot of times there was pushback because they're like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to learn something brand new. And so, there's just, there's just not that understanding of how quick and easy this can be, and how it really is just like a conversation. Like if you can talk to somebody, you can use these AI platforms. So those are definitely some blockers those are probably the tops that I usually see.
And I think it's interesting that you talked about those policies. I think that it's kind of a good transition to this piece of, what is how do districts decide what is a good use of AI? What is a bad use of AI? You read online right now, and a lot of it is, when you're giving advice to students, for example, make sure you check with your teacher and see if they think this is an acceptable way. And you might have 5 different teachers with 5 different answers. And I think that's the challenge with it being such a new thing is even as educators, what is okay and what's not. It is a challenge, and I don't know if we all have the right answer to that or not. And I think that is, I think I agree with you. That's one of the obstacles there. And that's just, the educator side. There's the student side as well. We'll get to in a minute too. What are some of your favorite examples that you've heard of people using AI in their classrooms, or even your own experiences with some of your favorite examples?
Sure. Do you want me like for teacher use or student use? Or
Yeah,
both?
I would say teacher use for now. I think we'll definitely hit student use in a minute.
Yeah, I think for teacher use, I love, so one of the things that we have available now in our platform is the ability to make custom tools, right? So where you can create your own version of a lesson plan generator, your own version of a writing feedback tool, whatever that you want to use. I do so the writing feedback side of things is one of my favorite tools to use. With the custom feedback tool, what you can do is, you can upload a rubric that you can create yourself, or you can have MagicSchool help you create. And then you can actually build out a tool that will score like multiple, pieces of writing at a time. And I don't advocate, and no one at MagicSchool probably most platforms would advocate for teachers to use the AI for like a final grade. But if you wanted to like give initial feedback and like, here's an estimated score of what you might, get if you submitted this paper now, then you can give it back to students so they can go and make those quick corrections. So I think the instant feedback that a teacher can now give is huge, because that's something that's always been dreamed of in education, is like being able to meet with every student and give them feedback. And now you can do that from a teacher side and student side, which I'll talk about in a second. And then so other teacher uses, I love the whole idea of, like I already mentioned it earlier, but having like Arena or a lesson plan tool or something beside you when you're planning with your team, I think is super powerful. I used to, last year when I was working at an elementary school, there was one 5th grade team in particular, and I loved it. Every time I went into their planning, they had MagicSchool open. One person on the team, it was like that was their job, right? They were kind of like helping the team with like further, how can we, push our thinking further, and just kind of like putting questions into Raina as they planned. So they were still doing the work, but they were using it as like their collaborator. And I'm curious what they're doing this year now, because they've already had it for a year under their belt. But just, I think that having it as that collaborative partner with you as you're planning is really powerful. Now on the student side, well, actually I'm gonna rewind. Sorry, rewind. One more teacher thing. I almost missed it, because I was about to talk about it on the student side, but I was like, wait, this is important for teachers too. The whole differentiation piece, the accommodation piece, the modification piece, I think that is huge with these tools, where a teacher can create, like I can create a custom tool that's just for Andrew, right? Like let's say I have Andrew in my class who is obsessed with Fortnite. He needs, he needs the language dropped 2 reading levels on every math story problem. So I can make a custom story problem tool just for Andrew that's focused on Fortnite, dropped 2 levels, and then maybe I could also ask it to include, 3 multiple choice options for every question. I can do that full customization for every student if I wanted to. And I think that can be really powerful for teachers as well. Now on the student side, the feedback piece, like I think that's massive, that they can also get feedback instantly from a feedback tool. They can also differentiate for themselves. They can take ownership they can use a text leveler tool and drop the level of text for themselves, right? They can translate any text for themselves. They can ask it to make it relevant to them. So if they love video games and they're learning photosynthesis, they could say, make this relatable to video games. And it will find some creative way to make it interesting for that student. So I think that piece is really huge for the student use.
I think it kind of ties in some of what you said there to your piece earlier, that time saving is a big part of this, but it's not time saving for time saving's sake. It's, I think when I first was introduced to MagicSchool, you guys a lot were talking about tackling teacher burnout. And I think, as teachers save time and have more energies, and then realize as they play around with some AI tools like MagicSchool, that actually what they're able to do is very tailored to their goal. Instead of just, I'm going to adapt these materials to my classroom, it's like I can actually make this thing exactly what's in my head, because I can just keep sort of playing around with it. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and it was that idea of, I actually think what I'm coming up with right now, yes, it's saving me time, but it's better than what I'd been doing before too, because I've sort of gotten more comfortable using it. So I think it's those two things hand in hand that I think can really get teachers kind of all in on this sort of thing when they see those two things together. Like, yeah, it saves time, but it also helps me and my students too. So what are ways, I know you talked about ways students can use this on their own. What are ways that teachers can sort of help students to use AI? And we can talk about some of the student tools that MagicSchool has, or just in general ways that teachers can incorporate AI into their classrooms for their students.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was responsible for as a digital learning coach was kind of coaching teachers on teaching digital citizenship to students. And so I would actually go in and do lessons on digital citizenship, with each class once a month. So I was kind of always all around the building doing those lessons. But I think it's important for teachers to take ownership over that as well. And now incorporating AI literacy and what that looks like within digital citizenship, I think is huge. And so I think teachers can use tools like MagicSchool, or if they're demoing, they can demo, ChatGPT or some other large language models for students to kind of show them how they work, have conversations. Like I've seen some teachers do even like just simple character chat bots together, like as a class, like whole group, just kind of introduce them to what it looks like. How can you talk to the AI? Like what is talking to the AI look like? One thing that we set up on my former campus is we actually created posters that were AI sentence stems. So like, how can you start the conversation? So simple little things like a prompt starter. So please explain this to me like ... or make this or drop this level ... just little things to help students get started speaking to the AI. But I think incorporating it into, like I said, those daily, weekly digital citizenship lessons, showing off all of if you've ever used Magic Student, when you first jump in on MagicSchool, there's the little acknowledgement that pops up that talks about like, how to be careful with AI, be careful of bias and all those things. Turning that into lessons with students, I think is important. Just making sure they understand that not everything you're seeing is always going to be accurate. It's getting better. It's getting pretty good, but it's not always accurate. And making sure they understand that, bias does exist, especially as they get older, understanding that there are issues with those things. And so I think that's that's important. And then I will also say, like, just not to toot our horn, but we've got MagicSchool has, the certification courses for educators to take, but then we also have one right now. We're trying to make some more. We have one for students where they can take it and they can learn about the platform, the ins and outs, the what it does well, what it doesn't do well, and then go from there.
So what do you think, as we talk about this with students, how should teachers address like the ethics of using AI with their students?
Yeah, I think it always starts with open conversations. I went to a middle school just about 2 weeks ago. Went to visit a middle school in East Texas, just demoing, MagicSchool, and they've never seen it before. And the first thing I asked them, I was like, "Okay, what do you know about AI? Like, what is it? What have you heard?" And then I love their honesty, right? Though some of them will tell me, "Oh, it's evil," or some will say, "Oh, I think it's kind of good." And you want to get those conversations out there, right? Like, let the kids lead the conversation, because they jumped right in. They told me, "I'm using AI on Snapchat. That's, I use it on my parents' phone. My mom and dad says it's evil because, you're not actually thinking." And then you dive into that. You say, "Well, what does that mean? What does it mean you're not actually thinking?" And so I think letting them kind of lead the conversation and then get into, well, let's talk about it. How could we use it in an effective way where you're still thinking, you're still learning, but it's just maybe helping you, just like the calculator might help you in math sometimes, right? Or email helps us teachers get information out to your parents faster. Like, imagine if we didn't have that, like so think about how then can we use AI? It's a tool that's always going to be here now. How can we use that in a safe way, in a respectful way, where you're still learning and you're not going to leave school dumb as rocks? So I think, having those conversations, letting kids lead the conversation and be transparent, I think is important.
So having it, as I heard you kind of talk about, guiding students through how to interact with AI, I was thinking back, I don't remember even who I was having this conversation with, but it was talking about tech, and sometimes, students are better at using different tech than the teachers or adults are. And I said, well, I think sometimes we think that, but I don't know if it's always the case. They use it more, right? But 10, 15 years ago, if you sat with a student while they did a Google search, you'd be like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
If that's what you're looking for. And I think it's a similar thing of like how, and it's different. This isn't a Google search as you're doing this, right? I use some of the chatbots with my students where it's a factory worker in England. Pretend they're sitting across from you, right? You're literally having a conversation. This isn't like, typing a certain keywords. This is actually trying to have a conversation, and it should respond to you in kind.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of the use I've seen of students who've just jumped in to start with it on their own without guidance, they are using it like a Google search, or they're using it just to get the quickest possible result without using it effectively. Because if you're using it effectively and you learn the skills behind how to like write a good prompt and continue like prompt chaining, as some people call it, right? Like until you get the best output, you're just going to get pretty surface level results. Where when you see people who know how to use this stuff, the things that people are creating all over, you go on any social media platform, my algorithm is like all, AI. Some of the things people are doing right now is wild, almost to the point where I'm like, I hope students don't learn it too fast, because like it's pretty insane what you can do with it.
So all of the things kind of we've been talking about, I think, are also reasons why a lot of educators are hesitant to dive in with AI and address it with their students. So what would you say to educators who both aren't super experienced with AI, or are hesitant to talk about it with their students? Like, what would you say to them to get them to understand maybe it should be a conversation we're having?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, you learn best by doing things, right? You learn best by getting your hands on things. And I feel like it's moving so fast. there are very, very easy entry points to using AI. Whereas like, I feel like our platform is one of the easiest ways to get started is you can go in and simply push a button to, to see what AI can do. Do I think that's where it should stop? No. Like, I feel like people should build much more knowledge in the AI space. That's why, using the custom tools and things like that, I think is even more beneficial. But I think it's always tricky to want to to learn something new, and you're always going to have pushback. I would just always look back to and point to past technologies that have rocked education and where we would be today if we hadn't embraced that, right? Like I brought up email, you bring up Google searching. When I was a kid, we still had the card catalogs at the library. Like I could not imagine like having to go find a book in the library where I can just go online now. But, like you have to think, okay, AI is that next big thing, like possibly, like as a lot of people say, bigger than the internet. Like it's going to affect everything. And so I feel like it's one of those, like in the past, I would say tiptoe in, teachers, like, it's okay, take your time. Like on most tech platforms, that's what I would have always said. This is different though. Like it's going so fast. Like I feel like there has to be more initiative, like district wide, like just not to push teachers, like that's never a good idea, like to be pushy. But I think strongly encouraging and giving access to training, giving access to tools. If a district is sitting on their hands, then there's nothing their teachers can do. So I feel like that has to be addressed a little bit quicker.
It's interesting hearing you kind of say how fast it's moving, because I think that might be part of the hesitancy too of, as someone who embraces all sorts of different technology, some of the pushback I've heard over the years has been, well, now it's the next thing, and I just learned how to do that, and now we're doing this, and now, okay, AI is the big thing, but it's changing, ever changing. And I think that is one of the hard things too. But I think you did touch upon it. It isn't. I don't think it's going anywhere. It's like a category, not a platform, right? And so I think that's a lot of maybe what to get across to educators. I think the other thing is for a lot of teachers, the hesitancy is, well, my students will just use it to cheat. Right. And that it's probably going to happen, but 10 years ago, they were just finding websites and homework help sites. And when I was in school, I won't say how long ago, people would pass along, oh, here's my binder from all the work my brother did 2 years ago. Right. And it's, it's a different way of having to address those sorts of problems as educators, but ultimately, like you said, I don't think it's going anywhere. And if we don't teach students how to use it, it's going to have an impact, going forward for them. I think I read an article recently that said, AI isn't going to replace workers, but workers who know how to use AI are going to replace workers who don't. And I think I think that's kind of it, right? It's if everything can be done with AI, then we're all in trouble. But what would you say, I guess, in me, I guess I segued into my own next question, but what would you say to people who kind of say that worry that that's going to be what policymakers maybe are going to try to do with AI is replace things that had normally been done by teachers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I agree with the idea that, for example, when teachers, the next 5 years are going out to apply for jobs, a question's going to come up. How do you use AI in your workflow, your day-to-day workflow? Like, how do you use it to help you in lesson planning? Because if the teacher comes to the job saying they've never used it before, and then the other teacher comes saying, I can knock out, differentiated lessons in minutes, and that's going to be a determining factor for sure. Like I could see that being the part in education that's not really replacing teachers, but it's, like you said, replacing teachers with teachers who are using it. So I I still strongly believe like like AI taking over teacher position, like teaching spots, I can't see happening just because of the social emotional piece to everything. It's just too big. Like when I was a teacher, I feel like I spent most of my day just loving on kids and trying to help them through their emotional day to day, besides the teaching part. But I do think there are going to be pieces to it that will, I hope, are enhanced to make those elements, the social emotional elements, and I hope that we have more time for that. Like we have more time to help address those things because AI is there to help us with the other. So, but yeah, I'm not as fearful of that side, like I said, of it taking our jobs, just because most of the people saying that have never been educators. You know what I mean? Like they don't get what it actually takes to work with a student who's struggling.
So with that, and we got a little into it, but how do you think it could change the role of educators going forward? How AI can change our role and our job going forward the next, let's say, 15 years out, maybe?
Yeah, I could see it going several ways. I think the expectation will change. What I'm afraid of, and I remember I actually was speaking to a superintendent about this recently. My fear would be that because AI makes things not necessarily easier, but faster for teachers to complete work, they save time. My fear is then what would be held over them is, now we're going to give you more. Like, oh, great, you can do all this. Now you can do this too. Right. Like that's something I don't want to see happen. I feel like give teachers the win, let them use their time to do better things for their students. Don't pile on more, right? Just because they can do it. I think I'm hoping that it changes the way that we prioritize learning outcomes. So obviously, like testing, state testing, things like that, I feel like could be changed dramatically. I mean, I did some experimenting with some teachers last year. We had set up like a student, like a chat bot with a rubric attached, and we had the chat bot be the assessment, right? So where students had to have a conversation about the topic that they were learning, and then the chat bot would kind of help figure out, okay, how much does the student really understand based on these questions and the conversation. Whereas you compare that to a multiple choice, 10 to 20 question test, that's the traditional way of checking these things. That student could have guessed, that student could have been having a bad day. Maybe they have testing anxiety. It was totally different, right? Like you could see the AI was able to pull out like little spots that the student seemed not very confident in. It was able to ask questions that took the student deeper if the student didn't understand the question, which, how often does that happen where a student doesn't get the reference in the question? Like it's a culturally, difficult question for some students, and then they can ask it to restate the question. I just feel like it's going to upheave assessments eventually, which I hope it does. But yeah, that's just one area I think is going to change. I think, and then of course, like you brought up the cheating thing and writing. Obviously, writing is still important. I think writing has to be taught still through high school, college, just so kids understand what good writing looks like. Because if you just give them AI, they're just going to, they're not going to have any reference point as to what AI should look like. So I think the way we teach writing could change, just as far as like, maybe not the final result being the most important piece, but the process, which is how it should have been in the first place, right? Like the actual thinking process, critical thinking. Like I hope that becomes even more amplified as time goes on.
I really liked what you said about just give teachers the win.
Yeah.
I think that's, to me, what some of this can do. I've spent more than 20 years here teaching, and I feel like the number of things I'm responsible for has gone up and up and up, and like nothing's been removed from the plate. And so I think some of those things, I think as educators, one of the more discouraging thing is like the more things we're doing, sometimes we can feel less effective because of that. Even if at its core, like we're doing a good job and people will tell us we're doing a good job, it's like that teachers are pretty good at feeling guilty when they feel like they're not doing things for their students. And so, I think, we are saying the social emotional supports, and teachers can have more time for that, and digital citizenship, right? It's something that we're supposed to, New York State adopted standards for those, and it's supposed to be incorporated throughout the curriculum. And I think it goes hand in hand with assessments, as we've kind of found over the years, in the last 20 years, that a lot of times, if things aren't the way our system is set up, if things aren't being assessed, it kind of has hurt the amount that it's focused on by districts. And I think, if this can free up some of that too, I think it can change a lot. And I like that piece of give teachers a win. I think, what I even going back right away at the beginning of what you said, when you talked about teacher burnout, that was a big focus of MagicSchool when I sort of first became familiar with it. And it's kind of what got me to go, like, okay, let's check this out. Because every tool I've ever used is like, look how cool this is for your students. And every teacher I've ever known wants to help their students. And it's just like, I do, but I have these other things. And it's that idea of, let me check out what this is, and then seeing what it could do for my students. Once I realized what it could do for me, I think is sort of that double-edged sword. I think it opens up a whole lot, and it sort of energized me, because of those two things, has sort of energized me in a way. Like, I set the goal going into this school year that I was going to have every day a dedicated daily warm-up. And it's something I've had sporadically in my career. And I was like, I'm going to do it every day. And then found out I was going to be teaching the class I taught last year, but then a different class I haven't taught in a long time, and split between buildings. And I don't know if without MagicSchool I could have done that. Just having like a little paragraph and a Google form multiple choice, and even generating explanations for the choices, way better than I would have ever come up with. And I don't know if I would have carried it through to this point of the school year if I was cobbling those together myself, or if they would have been as good. So, for me, it's those two things. I'm doing something I really wanted to do, but I don't know if I would have had the time or space to do it had I not had an AI tool there to give me something. And then again, like I said, better than I would have done is I can say, here, the learning objective is this, create a paragraph that accomplishes that, and then I want key vocab, and it's just very tailored to what we're looking for, and what to have it do. And I think that for me is kind of what this opens up for educators. I think if they can see it, I think once teachers get their hands on it, like you had said and I said, I think it kind of opens up a lot usually. So you have said a few times for teachers and for students to have this AI tool be a thought partner, and I've heard that a lot related to AI. Could you tell us a little bit about what that means, and maybe how do you explain that to educators, but importantly to students too, so they know in their lives and in their academic careers what that means?
Yeah, definitely. So I think of AI often as, like, when I think of thought partner, I think of like when I'm put with a partner in class, like when I was a student and I was paired up with somebody, or when I was teaching, when I had a partner teacher. I think of it as another voice, but ultimately I have the final say, right? Like if I'm partnered with someone and I'm submitting work, the work is still mine to submit, right? It's still mine to turn in for a grade. So I think of a thought partner as, like, I'm going to let the AI, depending on the situation, I'm going to let the AI do maybe 70% of the work, maybe 60%, where I'm going to come in and do the final 40, right? And I'm going to come in and do, I think on MagicSchool site, we say 80-20 approach, which I agree with on some tasks for teachers. Rubric generator, let AI do 80% of it and you do the final 20. But for students, I'm a little bit more on the side of, like, I want the students to do a little bit more of the work, but it also depends on the learning outcome. So if the learning outcome that I'm looking for is, I want students to be able to create an outline right, for a piece of writing. Well, I'm not going to give them the tool that writes the whole outline for them. I want to give them tools that are going to help them kind of along the way. Now, eventually, when they're an adult, could they use that tool to make the outline for them? Sure. Like if they already know what an outline should look like, they know how to like determine if this outline matches what I'm looking for. Sure. But as kids, they're not ready for that, right? So I think giving them the tool that helps them make the outline, or give them the tool that writes the whole paper, and then they have to actually make the outline from that written paper and work backwards. I think, like I said, it just depends on what the learning outcome is, how much AI, we allow them to use for certain situations. And I think as you train them, even young and like I'm always wanting elementary, like, 4th, 5th graders start learning about this now, right? So that way they can kind of figure out, okay, what does this look like to work alongside of this, where I'm not just copying it. It's helping me improve my writing and get better and better. And I think that's something our platform does really well, is like even in the writing feedback tool, when kids are working with it as a partner, and then they're getting feedback, it's not going in and rewriting the paper for them. It's saying, hey, you did this here. This is cool. Here's an example of what you could do when you rewrite the paper. Like, here's an idea. Now, what would you do? Right. And so it's coaching them. Whereas if you go into like just ChatGPT, like for this purpose, you ask it to just help me write this better, it's going to rewrite it for you. It's not going to, unless you ask it to coach you and all that, which most students aren't going to do that. Right. So that's where I feel like tools like ours can help in that, and help kind of scaffold the learning of, okay, here's what working with AI looks like as a partner. And then eventually they can be released into the world with, and use those large language models on their own. But then they've been trained how to use them in a little more effective way. So.
And I like, your focus on, it depends on the task and what you want students to get out of it. I think that's kind of the key. As I've talked with my students about it, like, I'm not naive. Some of you are doing work using AI or whatever else they might do to get some answers, or to come up with answers to things. But ultimately it's about learning. And so if you're using it to replace your thinking, you're not learning anything, right? If you're saying, tell me this, you're not learning anything. There's a way to explain. And I really do like with going some of the student tools that you guys have at MagicSchool. I don't remember exactly, like Tutor Me, I think is one of them, right? Where I can upload as a teacher, okay, here's the materials from this unit, and a student can go in and it can sort of quiz the students and tutor the students, explain stuff, ask questions. And then if it's wrong, like, oh, you're almost right, here's a little more information. And watching those interactions happen is pretty incredible in a lot of ways too. And I think I agree. It's those kind of the difference between using AI and then using tools that are meant to be used by teachers and students is sort of the difference. Because getting released into the wild of ChatGPT is an entirely different world than if you're in a platform designed for education. I think is kind of a big thing. If you're not thinking, you're not learning anything. And if the goal is to learn stuff, it's very different than if it's just, hey, you need to find out this information to do whatever task, right? So I think that was I think that's a great way to think about it. I loved that you mentioned 4th and 5th graders, because that was one of the things I'm wondering if what's you would happen to think of. Where is it age appropriate, developmentally appropriate to start talking about AI, and where is it age and developmentally appropriate to start using AI? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So what I have to say is definitely my opinion. So I won't say it's MagicSchool's stance, but personally, I mean, I was always in the elementary world, right? And so I think, kinder's a little young, and I've seen some teachers do a couple of fun little things, like, they'll read The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and as a class, they'll talk to the Very Hungry Caterpillar as like a chat bot. That, to me, I think is totally fine. I don't think you're going to dive in deep with the kids about the AI. There, you're just using it as a fun activity, right? I think when you get to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade is where you can start kind of talking a little bit about, like, oh, what does it do? I think you can use it for some feedback purposes, like in third grade. I think by fifth grade for sure, I feel like they need to start knowing like what it is and how to use it responsibly, because when they go to middle school, a lot of them get access to devices on their own. And from there, if they have had no guidance, then they're just going to run with it with whatever way that they feel necessary. And so I feel like fourth and fifth grade can be a great setup years where you just kind of explore it. You talk about the digital citizenship side of it, like how to be ethical with it. And then hopefully they're equipped when they go to middle school, and hopefully their teachers in middle school are continuing the conversation and then starting to let them use it a little more and more. But I do think elementary, I think it's fine to use it. And I think it's like, if you're using a safe platform, right, I think it's fine to use it and start talking about it. But I don't think you go in super deep until middle school, high school is where you really start kind of diving into this is how you use it. And this is what's great about it. And this is what's dangerous about it, honestly.
I think, it's part of me too thinks inviting conversations. You talked about this earlier. One of the things I was talking about my daily warm-ups and what I do, anything I use MagicSchool for or any other platform, I'll put a little thing at the bottom that says created with help from MagicSchool.ai, and that has led to some conversation. You used AI to do this. How come we can't use AI? It's like, well, let's talk about how I used AI. And it was literally like 20 minutes of carved out of class time to talk about this one thing and how I generated it and how I asked it to, regenerate it. Now try this. Now add this. Change this choice to this question. And the idea of, did it do all the work for me? Did I still plan it? Is it still, in some ways my ownership, maybe joint ownership at that point? But, is that an appropriate use if you used it that way? And so I think, that's a good way too, to even younger levels to talk with students about the ways, if teachers are using it, the ways they're using it. Obviously, as you said, kindergarten. I mean, I don't even know how do you explain AI to a kindergartner in a way, right? But as they get older, to sort of be introduced to, although, I mean, it's everywhere really, if you think about it. Every platform students are using has an AI component almost now to it, all the social media and our phones and pretty much everything using it. Every Google search they do now has that. So I think it may be younger a few years from now than we think in terms of having to have that conversation with students. So I'm a part of a district technology team where there's instructional technology teachers who lead it. And every time we meet, we'll have whole days where we kind of meet and do work together. And whenever we do, just before we go on a break, there'll be a segment that they call One Little Thing. And each of the instructional technology staff will just present one little thing. And it could, it was simply, here's how to mute a browser tab, like little things like that. And I always kind of sit back and smile and take it all in, because it's like they've invented sliced bread with some of the reactions of just this little tiny thing that nobody knew existed. That it could be used, and just watching the reactions people have to those sorts of things. If you were to say to somebody who's kind of new to AI, a one little thing for them to get them started, or a tip for them as they use it, what do you think that would be? What's your one little thing?
Ooh, that is a good question.
I should have given that to you ahead of time.
No. I think it's better. Better if I have to think about it. Man, I think the thing that I like to show off, I've already touched on like the differentiation side, right? I think the instantly leveling text is one thing that if you're brand new to AI, if you've never seen it do anything, that can be such a game changer for kids. That's one. If I was going to go a little more advanced, I think it's asking AI to turn whatever it is you're learning into a game, asking it to adjust. And I think that can show a teacher like just how fun it can be too, and personalized for students. So like I just made a video the other day showing how I used Raina to create a choose your own adventure game, right? You can ask her to build out the prompt, like, and it'll build the entire prompt for you. You don't have to do it. You just ask it, make this game for me. And then I took that and put it in a custom chatbot, and it doesn't, it's not that difficult to do. So I think that's part of it. And I think, man, it's just about one little thing is just tell them to just start the conversation. Like, just go in and talk to it. Like it's not everyone thinks it's this big like thing. And I even tell people there's all these like self-proclaimed experts all over LinkedIn, especially. Don't get me started on LinkedIn, but all over that, like, they're like, oh, like I wrote this book on AI. I'm like, congratulations. It's only been out for like 2 years. Like, you're just as much an expert as anybody else who just had a conversation. Like, you just talk to it. And I think people get in their heads thinking they have to be like these coders or these professionals. It's like, no, you literally just talk to it, like back and forth. Like, what is it that you want? Okay, it didn't come out with what you wanted. Fix this for me, right? It's I don't know. I think that's a long answer to your short question. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. Listen, I don't know if there is it was sort of a trick question, because I don't think there is a short answer to any of these questions, right? Well, you mentioned the book, I wrote a book on AI. Well, I thought you were going to say congratulations. It already isn't relevant, right? Because of how fast it's all changing. So, I think that's a big part of it. I would say if it were me, it's just, you kind of touched at the end, just see what it does. Just go ask it to do anything. The first time I used the student tools, I've used the character chatbot the most. I'm a history teacher, so that fits pretty nicely with most of the topics I do, where it's just, be this a World War I soldier, for example. But the first time I used it, I saw, first of all, a lot of my students sort of self-corrected this for me, where it was giving so much information with every question, and students were like, whoa, shorten this for me. And that's great. And I pointed out to students, hey, you know how you're supposed to, I had them like jot down little things that they learned. And they're just like, how am I supposed to jot this down? And they're like scrolling. And I was like, okay. So then the next time I just put that in my instructions of like, try to keep your answers to 2 or 3 sentences, right? Like, you kind of just learn, as if it didn't come out how you want on the student side. Yeah, you'll probably have to wait till the next time you use it to recustomize that tool. But for me, that's a big part, is just see if that idea you've had, you never had time to do. See what happens. I wrote down the choose your own adventure game. Did you? Now, you said you made a video on that?
I did. Yes. The TikTok video.
All right. Well, I will. We're gonna have that. We'll have that link in the description for people. I'm gonna go look at it when we're done.
It would be easy for you. Just you can figure it out. It's nothing crazy. It's just like, that's the thing. Like, if you can imagine it, like, you imagine an idea, try it, like, play with it. So that's kind of what I've just been doing, like, the last year, especially. I've gotten more comfortable with it. I'm just like, oh, I wonder if it'll do this, and I'll just try it.
Well, I've heard, as you mentioned, the choose your own adventure game, similar to digital escape rooms, and I've heard people use those, and those are pretty engaging. It could just be something you kind of already do that's like, okay, now turn it into this interactive thing that maybe I couldn't have figured out how to do that before, right? And so I think it unlocks so many possibilities. Like I said, it saves time, but like, man, some of the stuff I'm coming up with is better than anything I did on my own. I actually had somebody recently in one of the classes I was in talk about how their planning partner moved away, right? Different district, and they're not in the district anymore, and they're still close to them, they're still friends with them, but now, like, AI's kind of turned into that planning partner where they're like, oh, brainstorm this for me, or come up with an idea of that, or, where they had sort of split this work, it's sort of replaced that, which you never necessarily want to have AI replace those human interactions we get and the ideas we get, but that idea of the type of thing it can do, even for new teachers who maybe don't have those relationships yet with staff, of like, you kind of have this planning partner that probably has more ideas than any person so I think that's huge there. So, Andrew, I can't thank you enough for joining me again today. I guess I'll leave it to you. Are there any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today?
Man, I would just encourage every educator to just dive in. Like, just don't, I know it can be a scary thing to do something new, But I would obviously I would be remiss to not bring up MagicSchool, and say, hey, like, come check out MagicSchool. It's free to get started. I mean, it's free. You can use it for free forever if you want to. And it's easy to use tools. There's tons of resources on our website, as far as like certification courses that are free. Our YouTube channel is pretty extensive with lots of how-to videos on how to get started. Social media, all the things. Like, find us on there, and we would be happy to partner with you and help you get started on your AI journey. You can even reach out to me personally if you want to send me a message. I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So I really appreciate you having me. This has been so fun.
And I know we've been talking about AI generally, but I mean, I'm wearing my MagicSchool shirt here, so
I saw the
I was a little close. Yeah, I was a little close to the. I was like,
love it. Yeah.
So a big fan. It's part of the reason I reached out to you about this is, again, had a lot of tools over the year, but MagicSchool, AI in general, MagicSchool specifically, sort of a little spark in me that has me pretty excited about kind of where we're headed with things. So thank you, and I encourage all of you to check out Andrew on social media, check out MagicSchool and what they can do for you, and we'll see you next time on EdTech Made Easy.